we will start welcoming people here, Lev. And as you know, with the Substack, it'll take some time for people to start joining. So we'll just, uh, as we start, just welcome everybody to the conversation that we're about to have. This is a conversation that Lev and I wanted to have for some time, and it's about global developments. And there's so many urgent global developments that are happening right now. I mean, today, in the past several hours, we're hearing about major developments. And I'll say this before we get into it, and as we have more people joining the chat as a way to buy a little bit of time as we welcome everybody here. You know, a mistake that I made, not a mistake, a maturing of the Midas Touch network, I'll say, if you will, is in earlier iterations of our growth, I was so focused on domestic politics, what's happening in the campaigns, because that's what I knew most, right? And also as a former litigator who handled lots of high profile cases across the country, my specialty was law, federal court cases, state cases. And so my expertise was law, and I had a knack for covering domestic politics. But the problem with that lens being so narrow is that so much of what's happening in the United States is not to be viewed in a vacuum of domestic politics. And you really have to pull back and focus on what's happening internationally, because in many ways, Donald Trump and this MAGA movement is just yet another vessel of a broader movement that sweeps through international communities, that finds a home, in my opinion, in the rhetoric of the Putins and the Orbans and the Bukelis and the Javier Mileis and the Le Pens in France, the Reform Party, which is not so Reform Party, it's like calling it Truth Social, in the UK, the far right wing parties in Germany and that we see throughout Europe. You have to view it as all part of one movement that is highly nationalistic, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and that has a authoritarian at the top who is someone who reverts us back to pre-enlightened thinking, which was a push away from authoritarianism. So you have to, I think, contextualize things internationally and understand the impacts here. Also, just obvious examples of how tariffs impact us in the United States, how trade wars backfire and impact our farmers, how wars abroad are impacting what's happening here in the United States. So I'll just say that at the outset, as we welcome about 1,000 people pretty quickly, into this, is that international framework has been a major priority at the Midas Touch Network over the past 9 months. And if people have, I hope, seen that in the coverage where we, at a micro level, talk about Japan and the collapsing of the current Japanese government. And as we get into South Korean politics, as we get into what's happening, of course, in Canada, launching Midas Canada, but also a focus on what's happening in Gaza and the atrocities that have been, committed, and what this deal, which is really a ceasefire that's being called a peace deal, when we've seen ceasefires before, what that we have to have these conversations, and it's been a major priority in Midas. And so when I welcome you, Lev, to this chat, you have field specialty and experts and sources in international affairs, very closely, so I welcome you here. We should talk about it all, Lev. We should talk about, 73% of Ukraine in a blackout after Russia targeted its energy facilities. Why don't we start there? It's one of your specialties, Ukraine, and then we'll go to other areas, because as we reported and others, Russia hit the energy grid. Ukraine's been hitting the oil refineries, knocking off 40% or 50% of Russian capacity there. What are we seeing there? What should we be focused on?
I want to first start off by saying, first of all, I love you and your brothers. You guys are doing incredible work. I've been with you from the beginning. I remember when Midas Touch just started back, what was it, like 6, 7 years ago? What I mean, I was the first guy, one of the first guys you guys were reporting on all the breaking news, it's incredible to see how you've expanded, and the coverage is incredible. And I think what you just said is extremely important because what's taking place internationally, especially Eastern Europe, especially with the relationship between Russia, between not even so much Russia, but Putin and his allies, his oligarchy, and our president and our oligarchy right now, and the transformation of how both of them and spent over the years of transforming to what we're seeing play out today. And I think there's, because the media is not covering it at all. I mean, you'll hear bits and pieces of like, oh yes, there was like the lights out, Ukraine got hit today again, but they're not covering the real stories. They're not covering what's really happening. That Vladimir Putin today, for instance, was standing there and talking about how they should dismantle the Nobel Peace Committee because Donald Trump didn't receive the Nobel Peace Prize. I want everybody just to think for a second that Vladimir Putin, this is during the time where supposedly Putin or Trump are at each other's throats because Trump is supposedly supposed to give these Tomahawk missiles, which have never gotten to Ukraine, but he's talking about giving it to them. This is in the meantime, you see the special envoy from Putin, Kirill Dmitriev, who is, and I've been reporting on it, Ben, for those of you that follow know, he is literally Steve Witkoff's handler. He's also, now we see Kushner coming out of the woodworks, not only in the Middle East, but you're going to start seeing him coming in more into the conversations of Eastern European real, because this is the people that have been actually dealing with the stuff behind the scenes. But let's take it a quick back. Yeah, today was a major hit. Half of Kiev is still without power. We just got off the phone with my cousin. He lives in Kiev, Alexander. We just did a report about how many, actually a story about a gentleman that came home fighting from the war to visit his family last night, just to see his family get killed during the attacks on Kiev last night. One of his sons, and so on. So the atrocities there are just incredible, and they're continuously happening. And you see, obviously, Trump saying nothing about it. But there's something else happening really wicked behind the scenes right now that nobody's talking about, and we're going to break it here first, here with you, Ben, is that for those of you that remember, when Trump sent me to Ukraine, the first quid pro quo I came there to give wasn't to Vladimir Zelensky. It was to then President Petro Poroshenko. Petro Poroshenko became the president in 2014 after the Maidan era. Petro Poroshenko also, at that time, there was a pro-Russia movement led by Viktor Medvedchuk. Now, these names I might sound a little bit very important, because right now, a couple of days ago, the New York Post wrote a story about how the FBI is now looking into Medvedchuk and Poroshenko, into their ties of coordinating during this war. But what my sources are really telling me is what's happening is Kash Patel, the FBI, and Donald Trump are now putting pressure on Poroshenko to rewrite history, as they're trying to do everywhere else, when it comes to the Bidens, and bring it back there to all of a sudden. And today, Petro Poroshenko was actually put on trial in Ukraine for treason. So these are some of the things that are playing behind the scenes that nobody even's talking about. That is a tremendous influence here. Other things, for instance, that are happening, Ben, is special envoy from Russia, Putin, is now also coming down here to meet with Congresswoman Anna Polina Luna, because she wrote him a letter inviting him to come out to work on expanding Russian and American trade, Ben. Trade. That's right. You heard it. Not sanctions, but they're talking about how we're there to expand trade. Kirill Dmitriev, the same special envoy, today, if you take a look, and I welcome every one of you to go to Twitter and take a look at his posts, he put out maybe 10 or 11 posts retweeting and tweeting about Melania Trump. How Melania Trump has today worked out this great deal. And we've also found out that Melania Trump has been in communications with Vladimir Putin directly since Alaska. I mean, you can't make this shit up, man. Like, that here you have Trump
But you
coming out
know
of.
what? I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah,
it seemed obvious, not that, but that something was going on, right? Because Zelensky's wife continued to, there was a move where they just kept on talking about Melania over and over again, which they obviously probably got word through their intelligence that that was happening. So that's why we saw that Melania push, huh?
yeah, 100%. And the push was, and all of a sudden today, the big announcement was and I want everybody to think about, out of the 20, 30,000 kids that were stolen from, kidnapped from Ukraine, that the Russians took and that are using reprogramming. Today, the big announcement was that there was 8 kids got returned back, which is great. Each child the returned back, I would is a happy day. But just think about it, 8 kids out of 30,000 or whatever that number is. But then to make it matters worse, if you go on Dmitriev's website, he talks about how Melania played a key role in also returning Russian kids from Ukraine, to making it seem like this was some kind of like a both sides strategy. So again, it's the misinformation, the disinformation, and that's why I say independent journalism, like what you guys do, what Aaron does, is so important nowadays. I don't consider myself a journalist. You know that, Ben. I consider myself a truth teller, somebody that's lived the life, still lives it with them, knows it, and is able to somehow get this information and bring it, risking all. But the stuff that you guys do, and I think it's important now. Also, me and you spoke about this. Maybe doing something about Ukraine and expanding the platform and maybe getting the information out. But I think it's going to be an enormous part to what's going to take part between Russia relationships, because that's the next play. Because the other thing I'm hearing is why Trump was really pissed off at Putin. That when Trump came into office, there was conversations that Kushner was leading both between the Israelis and between the Russians. And both were promised to Trump that if Trump gave them the leeway to do what they wanted to go and do what they wanted to do, that the wars would be over quickly and Trump then would come in as the savior. You saw that transpire in the Gaza Strip. Trump basically came in, gave Netanyahu free reign to do whatever he wanted to attack Iran, do whatever he wanted to. And yes, today we're seeing, yes, peace announcements, but at what cost? They wiped out how many dead, how many wiped out, and basically to what degree did they go to be able to get that peace? The same thing was promised to him in Russia. But the problem there is Putin doesn't have that same army and couldn't go do the same devastation and couldn't wipe out Ukraine in those 3-4 months. And that's why Trump is so frustrated, because he can't get the same result. Because he thought that Russia is going to come in there, wipe out Ukraine, Trump's going to come in there, save whatever it is, makes just like you see what playing out in the Gaza Strip.
Look, what's playing out in the Gaza Strip, though, is being misreported by corporate news as a peace deal just because Donald Trump uses the word peace deal. Um, if anything, there is a ceasefire, and there have been 57 ceasefires before that have fallen apart. And people, because of the tenuous nature of the region, people never spiked the football during a ceasefire as though this was a Nobel Peace Prize worthy thing, because you have to then see the results of it and what becomes of it. To me, the biggest tell was Donald Trump was asked the most basic question yesterday, which is, do you support a two-state solution? What happens after phase one? So it should be a very simple, if you asked me, what should happen? I would tell you that there should be a two-state solution. I would tell you that there should be a free Palestine. I would tell you that there should be a free Israel. And I think that there has to be a way to have them live side by side. But I would be very declarative in saying that there needs to be a free Palestine, period, full stop. And I would respect the sovereignty of the country. And I would absolutely say that Hamas needs to go. The terrorists need to go. The hostages need to be returned. I'd be very clear in what a faith, but when Trump was asked the question, he said, I'm just going to let the people who do the deal do what they did. That what does that even mean? That's not an answer. So what my fear is that it's just a ceasefire. Something happens, it quickly reverts back in 30, 60 days to a situation that's even worse. If it could even be even worse. But then what does it look like? How ultimately does this resolution create a free Palestine as well? And to me, if you don't answer that question, you're not being a responsible leader because for a lot of variety of reasons. So anyway, that's
100%.
how do you not answer that question? I guess is my point.
Ben, I mean, it's a simple, you know how a simple way I'll answer you this? It's how do you not answer that you're the America, the leader of NATO, the leader of the free world, when asked the question that if Russia attacks NATO, will you support NATO? He said, depends. Depends. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing. He's not a true leader. He's not. Donald Trump does not care about peace and this was all done for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now that the Nobel Peace Prize is out of the way, now that he has lost it, now that that is gone, you're going to see a different animal unleashed. You're not going to see that as disgusting, as sick, and as crazy as it's been up to now, Ben. He still was somehow detained because he still in his crazy world thought that he had a chance to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Now that that is off the table, now that is gone, now you're going to see some real Donald Trump actions coming out. And what Donald Trump cares about right now is Project 2025. He doesn't care what happens in Ukraine, in Europe. He doesn't care what happens in the Middle East, because what he cares about right now is taking over, making sure 2026 that he stays in power, that he continues to control the House. Right now, his what I'm hearing from my sources that that we're going to have more indictments coming very soon, and it's not just shift the press. He has shifted really towards Christopher Wray, and Wray has been under now is majorly chopping block because that's a way for him to shift the narrative and change the story of January 6th, which is extremely important. And the ploy of putting the National Guard into every place. And the bottom line is, look, he's still looking to attack Venezuela, and he's talking about doing the insurrection. He's not joking about it. He's mentioning it and going forward. So that's what he cares about, and that's what he cares about. He doesn't care about what's going on. That was all up to now, and now you're going to see the real Donald Trump come out.
A lot of people are asking, and we could cover so many topics, but let's deal with this one though. The Qatari Air Force Base in Idaho. Um, Again, it's unclear what it really means. Although the emir and leader from the Al Thani family, who runs the country, sitting right next to Hegseth in that photo of themselves, and whether it's going to be used for Qatari Air Force training or it's unclear a lot of the details, other than to say that they seem to be announcing a Qatari Air Force base exclusively in Idaho. I don't know how else to describe what that would be. It would be odd if we had a French Air Force base or a UK Air Force base or a Australian Air Force base in a country. It is particularly odd, especially knowing the history of Qatar also in supporting and housing and sheltering Hamas leaders. And I understand they want to modernize. I understand they've have a campaign of trying to appeal to a broader, I understand those things, but to do a Qatari Air Force base in the United States while he's giving $20 billion to Argentina while kicking 20 million Americans off of healthcare. I, I've asked a number of people about it, and they go, Ben, I don't even know what to say. Like I don't even know how to respond to it. It's that crazy.
It's that crazy, Ben, that I've called even people that I speak to on a daily basis are like in shock. I mean, like this was one that they kept sealed pretty good, I guess, that it didn't even leak. Just think about it, that they came out and were able to say it without it leaking, even a day before or anything. And that's another thing, what Hexec and them are doing is I'm hearing you go heavy into the AI to be able to, because the leakers are the closest people to Hegseth. They've been around him for so long, he can't find them. So they're now using tactics like AI face recognition and all kinds of stuff to be able to find people that are leaking information. It's insane.
And I'll flag this. Someone put it in the comments, but it's definitely worth thinking about. This also poses, I think, a geopolitical threat to Canada. So, Idaho's right there on the border with Canada. And you are now putting another country in the Middle East into the border with Canada. And one of the things that Qatar's been very good at is espionage related operations and hacking operations and things like that. They've at least been known to be success. So you wonder if there's any links also that, if you're Canada and your border now has a military base of a Middle East country that's going to be flying warplanes, it certainly feels also an aggressive move against an ally in Canada.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's Trump's way of nudging and pushing them to somehow say we need to be part of America. I mean, this is how sick they are. I mean, and that's one of the things that the way they think, you have to think out of the box. You can't think normally the way you would think in a regular person. That's why it's very difficult. And I'm understanding why it's very difficult for their people in the Democratic leadership to deal with these type of people, because you have to be really corrupt. You have to be really, you have to be like one of them to be able to think one of them, to think what could they possibly do ahead of time. And that's why they need to, start understanding the devil that they're dealing with. But the one thing I will tell you about, Ben, that I think that no, and I keep saying it more than ever, and that we need to unify one. The one thing that Donald Trump right now, with all this craziness going on, I'm going to tell you right now, something really big, and it's something simple. He's scared to be able to be forced to sit down with the Epstein survivors. That that is one of his biggest fears, and the people are not realizing. And I spoke to Congressman Ro Khanna, and we have over 3,000 people here for everybody to understand that. What the Democrats should be doing, we have survivors and we have victims that are that are asking to speak to the president. They should be on the front lawn. This should be the number one. So this should be on every social media. He should be asked this question and attacked every day, is answer us why you won't meet with the survivors. They want to talk to you. This is not bipartisan. These survivors are not Democrats. Some of them are conservative that voted for you, Mr. President. Charlie Kirk, in Charlie Kirk's memory, he wanted the Epstein files released. Do it for Charlie. I mean, there's so many different ways we could do this in this pride. I mean, instead of sitting there and trying to defend sombrero hats, you know what I'm saying? Instead of trying to fall into his head, we have the ammunition. Project 2025, Ben. He's already embraced it. Break it
You
down.
know, and I'll just say this in kind of closing though, but I've been in the past, and people know this on the network, very critical of Democratic leadership. But whether it was Leader Schumer during the first continuing resolution or Leader Jeffries, and I've noticed a change, I've thought, in the not buying into Donald Trump's framework, not getting lost in it, and actually pushing back aggressively and reminding the American people this isn't about sombreros or stupid stuff. This is about healthcare and holding the line and not caving. And you see right now when Democrats have actually stood up, for once, it's like, okay, that Republicans are all over the place right now on this shutdown. Like they are,
And we
you
got
know, they're,
Marjorie Green. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene coming on CNN saying it's the Republicans' fault that we have the shutdown. How are you not using that? How is tell me how the one thing that was very creative that worked strong, but I don't see any of it. Where are all the television ads with all this stuff? How come we're not flooding? How come there's no ads being flooded with this? With Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about the Epstein file, with Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how it's the Republicans' fault. I mean, he's giving such ammunition, and I don't see it. The people don't see it. Mass America doesn't see it. I mean, yes, the people that are tuning in to watch us, the people that are tuning in because subscribing to Save Our Democracy, yes, but we need to get it out to the majority, over 300 million people.
Well, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to Lev's Substack, subscribe to our Substack here at Midas Touch. It was great spending this time with all 3,000 of you, and it's a great thing that we can just pick up the phone, want to have a chat, just say, let's just do this in front of 3,000 people, because we're going to talk anyway. And so it's a great feature that Substack enables us to even be able to bring people together on a moment's notice and have these great conversations. Again, remember, subscribe to Lev's Substack, subscribe to our Midas Touch Substack. We appreciate all the great work that Substack is doing in general as a company, because I think it's definitely a new form of media in order to get news out to people. Stay strong, stay in this together, everybody, over the weekend. Lev, great seeing you. I will
God
talk to
bless you.
everybody
Love
soon.
you, brother.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
weekend.
Take
Take care.
care.
Bye bye.